It's been a big topic of conversation nationally, the so-called double tap strike of an alleged drug boat off the coast of Venezuela. The Trump administration is citing Article 2 authority, the War Powers Resolution, and the State Department's authority to designate groups as foreign terrorism organizations to justify recent U.S. military strikes on these vessels. Joining me live over Zoom is University of Colorado Law School Associate Professor Miriam Jamshidi. Thank you so much for joining us today, Miriam. Lots of questions, obviously, some people confused. First, can you explain this law particularly in a little bit more depth for all of us to understand?
So the Trump administration is basing its strikes against boats coming from Venezuela, South America, allegedly carrying drugs, on the president's Article 2 commander-in-chief powers. The administration is arguing that that Article 2 power gives the U.S. president the authority to strike these boats. But importantly, the administration is also basing its power to do this in the fact that it has designated various drug trafficking cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. There's a federal law that allows the Secretary of State to designate foreign organizations that engage in terrorist activity or terrorism that threatens U.S. nationals or U.S. national security as quote unquote foreign terrorist organizations. And that designation typically has resulted in various kinds of economic or regulatory sanctions that are then placed on those organizations, criminal prohibitions that are triggered, and those sorts of things.
And so would that justify the strikes? Has this been used in this way before? Any precedent?
So the FTO designation does not provide authority in and of itself to then engage in targeted killings, assassinations, murders against members of designated foreign terrorist groups. Has it been used by the executive branch in the past? It may have been used in the past. For example, in 2020, the Trump administration struck an Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, in Iraq. And it's widely believed that the designation of the Iranian Quds Force, the Revolutionary Guard that Soleimani headed, was part of the U.S. government's rationale for striking Soleimani. That being said, even if it's been used in the past in other contexts, there were arguably, or at least there was some argument that there was perhaps some armed conflict with those groups. Here, while the U.S. government is claiming that there is an armed conflict with these drug trafficking cartels, there are few, if any, legal experts that agree with that assessment outside of the U.S. government itself. So that would make the use of the FTO designation in this context particularly novel. But I want to emphasize that in no context should FTO designation alone provide any justification for effectively murdering somebody.
Right, right. And while we have you, can you explain why specifically this second strike on the alleged drug boat is causing such controversy in waves?
Right, that's a great question. So basically, under the laws of war, which govern the conducts of parties to hostilities once an armed conflict exists, and again, there's a huge question here as to whether or not there's an even armed conflict at all, but assuming that there is, it's very clear that you are prohibited as a party to an armed conflict from attacking somebody who has been wounded, who has been shipwrecked, who is basically defenseless, even if they're a combatant, even if they are a participant in the armed conflict. And in fact, it's only in that context where this rule applies, because you're not supposed to be targeting civilians at all. And there's a big question here about the fact that these individuals are almost certainly civilians and non-combatants. But again, assuming they're combatants, you're not allowed to strike them once they are wounded and helpless.
And so what would be the fallout, Professor? Would it be a war crime? What would you say?
Well, assuming we are in an armed conflict, then this would be a war crime. If we are not in an armed conflict, this is still a crime, but it's the crime of murder.
Got it. Professor Jamshidi, thank you so much for your clarity and your insight. We appreciate you.